We are back here on the Analytical Iowan podcast. It is Monday, December 15th, as you are listening to this. Getting a late start recording this, much later than I wanted to. Today's been kind of hectic. Now, I want to address yesterday's podcast and it not going up until the early morning hours of today. And what happened with that is, much like the other day when the same thing happened, I use an automation program to add my intro and my outro. It rips the audio out so I can post it to Spotify and do all of those kind of things for me so it works in the background. Um, so I don't have to take the time to do all of that um, because I found that, with life and working a full time job outside of just trying to make content and do everything else that I need to do, um, staying on top of everything was something I was struggling with. So I set this all up. Well, every now and then it glitches, and usually I'm pretty good at catching it. Um, and that's also why sometimes when it glitches out, you'll see it posts twice. Yesterday's podcast did that, it posted twice. Um, but it stalled. It stalled in the middle, and I didn't even notice it had stalled until much later. Once I figured out it stalled, and I it tried it again, it stalled a second time, but I was watching it that time, and I was able to restart it. Third time was the charm, and I got it pushed through. Um, so that's what happened with yesterday's podcast. Today didn't work out in my favor. I had a bunch of stuff going on, and by the time I was able to sit down and record, it is way later than I would have liked it to have been. Haven't even gotten any TikToks recorded yet today. I'm gonna have to do that after this, and I'm gonna try to get some recorded for the rest of today and a bunch for tomorrow. So I'm hoping tomorrow I will be back on a regular schedule. I got some time tonight. Maybe I will even get tomorrow morning's podcast recorded um, before it gets too late. So maybe these will all be going up in pretty short order. I'm hoping. Fingers crossed. Anyway, let's get into it. We got a lot to talk about. Now, first story we've got for today, Monday, we've got a sad story. Rob Rainier and his wife were found murdered in their house. Now, normally I wouldn't cover just a celebrity death. But immediately there were conspiracy theories floating around about this. Apparently, he had been working on a documentary that has not been released yet about ties between the Trump campaign and uh, Russia and Putin. Now, don't know that that had anything to do with it. Apparently, they were found by Rob Renier's daughter, um, and that ultimately they have arrested his son. Uh, he is the person of interest in this. They believe he did it. We don't know why. And one of the reasons I wanted to cover it was because of that political connection. But beyond that, I want to address something here. Okay. Donald Trump addressed this tragedy. And of course, we know Donald Trump is uncouth. He doesn't say the thing that needs to be said. But I won't, and I know MAGA's never going to hear this, but how would MAGA react if instead of talking about uh, Rob Rainier, this was talking about Charlie Kirk? Okay, this is what the President of the United States said in response to this horrific murder. Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social on Monday that uh, it was reportedly due to anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with the mind crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. And then, when speaking to reporters later today, he says, "Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person. I thought he was very bad for our country." Who says that? What kind of a person responds to a tragedy that way? Now, MAGA's going to come back. I guarantee you there are going to be MAGAs in the comments of maybe not this podcast because I blocked them all, but videos talking about Rob Rainier and what happened and people dragging Donald Trump for his comments, right? And they're going to say, well, you guys celebrated Charlie Kirk dying. No, we didn't. We just didn't care. There's a difference. Now, do I kind of have the same, I wouldn't say indifference with Rob Reiner that I had for Charlie Kirk, because I knew at least who Rob Reiner was as an actor and a director. I knew more about him and his family. And I'll say the same thing about this family, the Rainier family, that I said about Charlie Kirk. Didn't deserve it to happen. Charlie Kirk didn't deserve to get shot in public on a stage like that. Didn't deserve it, but it happened. I wasn't celebrating Charlie Kirk's passing. Okay, no, nobody really on the left was celebrating Charlie Kirk's passing. But to come out with a statement from the president of the United States saying that it was just because he had Trump derangement syndrome, which isn't a real thing. It's just something the right has latched onto as their way of saying, well, anybody who doesn't believe Donald Trump is mentally ill. In reality, the sycophants who support Donald Trump are probably going to be the ones with a mental illness. It wouldn't surprise me if the psychologists and sociologists in the future look back at this time of history and they come up with a term similar to Trump derangement syndrome for the group of people that would do anything for Donald Trump, believe anything Donald Trump says, all of that. Rob Reiner didn't deserve this. His wife didn't deserve this. His daughter didn't deserve to go through any of this. And we don't know what the cause was. Now, I said his son is in custody. That is the way I understand it. As far as we know right now, from what I am not seeing any motivation. No motive has been released. We don't know about any of it yet. And we may, in time, find out what happened. And maybe there is a political connection to it. But for right now, there's not. The only typically the or so far the only one I am seeing make that connection is Donald Trump and people commenting from Donald Trump. I know there was some speculation early before we had a suspect, before we knew what any of that was. Now that they have somebody in custody, now we just have to wait for the police and the legal system to do its job. More is going to come out in the coming days and weeks, as it always does. And we'll see if there really was a connection. But for the sitting president to come out with no empathy, no sympathy, and just act like this is all normal and he doesn't seem to care, it's on brand for Donald Trump. But if you really care about the office of the president or this country, that is not what we should be doing. That is not how we should be acting in the face of anybody's death. And speaking of Charlie Kirk, where is the flags being lowered to half staff? Where is it happening? It's not. Donald Trump lowered the flags to half staff for Charlie Kirk. And I would argue that Rob Reiner is more well known and probably more beloved than uh, Charlie Kirk was. Now, Charlie Kirk was very much liked and loved in certain circles, but I guarantee you, until he was shot, he wasn't a household name, not comparatively to Rob Reiner. And maybe his fame has waned in recent years, but at one time he was very much loved in this country. Um, so it was a horrible, horrible tragedy that never should have happened. Um, and now we just got to wait for the police to do their job. But it was reprehensible how the president responded to this. It's on brand for him. And of course, no Republicans are coming out to say anything against their Lord and Savior. They're treating this like business as usual. And we shouldn't be glorifying what he says. We shouldn't be sane washing it where we treat it like it's normal. This is not normal behavior. If the situation had been reversed and Kamala Harris had won the election and she had put out a statement like that saying when Charlie Kirk died that Charlie Kirk his death was due to reportedly the anger he caused others through massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind crippling disease known as Harris derangement syndrome. And if she had said, well, I wasn't a fan of his at all, he was a deranged person, and I thought he was very bad for our country, the right would have lost their damn mind. They would have been calling for her removal. They would have been calling for impeachment. They would have been calling for everything under the sun if it was about Charlie Kirk. But because it was somebody on the other side of the aisle and their Lord and Savior said it, crickets. This isn't normal behavior for a normal person. This is somebody who lacks empathy, lacks sympathy. On top of all of the health problems and the narcissism, Donald Trump doesn't care about anybody but himself. And he couldn't muster up enough just to come out and say something as simple as, this was a tragedy. Thoughts and prayers go out to the family. That's all he had to say. It would have been that simple. But instead, he had to turn it, even a person's death, into an attack against people that he doesn't like because he doesn't like the things that are saying about him. And that Rob Reiner was apparently working on a documentary that was going to look into the connection between Donald Trump and Putin for 2016. Now, that is not the actions of a president. That should not be normalized. But again, the Republicans are going to turn their head and ignore it and play it off. Now, we talk a lot about when the Republicans are going to find it, that enough is enough to walk away from Donald Trump. And that day is coming. The time is coming. And I will come back to this by the end. But the time for Republicans to walk away from Donald Trump is coming. And I think I know exactly how that's going to be. Now, let's get into the next story I want to cover. Apparently, in Syria, there was an attack by ISIS. Now, a apparent lone operative, who they are, I believe, looking for. I don't know if he's alive or dead, but a lone ISIS agent, terrorist terrorist group member, um, killed two members of the military and their civilian interpreter. But Donald Trump came out, I believe, during his first term and claimed total victory against ISIS, eradicated them. Has said it numerous times that he wiped them out. There was nobody left. But now he is promising retribution against ISIS, and he's going to go after them, and he's going to do the thing that he said he did during his first term. So, which is the truth? Is he going to eradicate them, or did he eradicate them? When it comes to this administration, we never know what the truth is because they will say either and both sides of every issue, and sometimes even a third variation of the same issue if he thinks it fits the narrative in the moment. It's all about looking tough, trying to bolster his image, and it's not about actually solving any issues. Now, we all thought that, at least I did, when he said he got rid of ISIS the first time, I was pretty sure he was lying. Now it appears that that is the case, that he didn't get rid of ISIS. They're still very much a real threat. And because it is this administration, because these events keep popping up, they keep happening, it just makes you wonder, and I don't know that they would have the resources to be able to pull something like this off and have a stretch that goes worldwide. You wouldn't think they would be able to do it, but could they? It's at least, it's a weird possibility. It's a weird thing to think about that this administration would have done that. But then you add in the uh, was it Afghanistani gunman who shot two members of the National Guard in D.C. Still don't know the motivation there. Killed one of them, and they were going to use that as as another reason to crack down on immigration. Is this something that somehow the CIA or somebody set up? Was it a situation where they left these people out in the open where they were an easier target? Again, don't know. And the fact that we're even questioning it is troubling to me. I would love to have the faith that this administration wouldn't sacrifice their own people. But yet, whenever we turn around, there are questions. Like I mentioned the National Guard officers that got shot in D.C. Seems bizarre. Then you go to Butler, Pennsylvania. Donald Trump supposedly gets shot in the ear. I don't think he was shot. He may have had a piece of glass or something nick his ear in a ricochet, and he was shot at. I don't doubt the fact that he was shot at. Okay, but there becomes a question: was it a setup? And you look at the whole situation and you go, I don't know. And that's a problem. The fact that with this administration, with this person involved, with Donald Trump involved, you go, I don't know. There were so many things with how that was handled, how the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania was handled. It makes you just go, what? Like, for example, he gets shot at. And go back and watch the video. It's bizarre. They cover him almost immediately. Then you hear that the target was taken out. You can you can kind of follow the time frame of when he was neutralized. Then he stands up, throws his fist in the air with the Secret Service agents trying to shield him. But right before he does all that, if you get the one camera angle from below that was taken, and you see the press get motioned by Secret Service to come in, they come around to the front of the podium with their cameras up so they can get that angle. Now, of course, they're going to do what the Secret Service tells them. But my question becomes, if you're in an active shooter situation and you're protecting somebody specific and you have a high profile target, like a presidential candidate, in this case, this was before he was elected, and they've been shot at, you get them covered. Why didn't they just pick him up? Maybe because he's 300 pounds, but why didn't they try to drag him into the limo? In part because he didn't want the image of being dragged away. Then then you allow him to stand up, get his full face exposed for a photo op. You bring the press in to get that photo op. And then as he's getting hauled off into the limo, he's yelling, "Where's my shoes?" The, every time this turns around, every time there is a situation, it just makes us question, could he really do it? And the answer comes back, yes. And this ties back into what I was talking about at the beginning with the Rob Rainier situation. He didn't have empathy for what happened to Rob Rainier. And that's not the first time he hasn't shown any empathy. Remember when Nancy Pelosi's husband was brutally attacked with a hammer? They were cracking jokes and saying, well, it was a lover's spat. And I think it was Donald Trump's son who was talking about having, like, underwear or an adult diaper and a bandage and a hammer as like a Halloween costume and going as her husband. And they all thought it was funny. Donald Trump has no empathy and he has no sympathy for people. It is not beyond somebody like that to consider sacrificing somebody else. They're all pawns to him. Remember, he didn't care about COVID. He didn't care. He tried it for a little bit, then the economy started to suffer, and he realized that actually caring whether or not people died was going to be bad for the economy. So then he quit listening to experts, quit listening to uh, scientists, and said, let's go on. We got to open the economy back up. And then he started pushing all of the anti-vax, anti-science. They talked in the one meeting, remember, where they were saying how good of a disinfectant bleach is about getting rid of COVID, how good it killed COVID. And he said, oh, disinfectant works great at killing the COVID virus. Maybe we should look at giving it intravenously. Maybe we should look into it. And I know it got blown out of proportion. A lot of people were saying he was telling people to inject bleach. And he just said, well, look into it. The fact that he even said look into it is dumb on the surface. The fact that he didn't go, before he even said it, that his brain didn't say, telling people that maybe we should inject disinfectant is a bad idea to say, tells you everything. He didn't care. He just wanted the numbers to go down. He didn't even want testing for COVID because he said, well, if we have more testing, we have higher cases. So let's just not test, because he knew how bad the numbers made him look. He doesn't have empathy or sympathy for the victims or the people that died or the people that got COVID or for anybody. This all just ties in together. All right. Now, the Supreme Court is going to be taking up and hearing a case on financial reform. Okay. And this is on a challenge brought by Republicans to, I believe, eliminate the um, cap on campaign donations. Now, with this Supreme Court, good chance that they end up actually uh, agreeing that they end up getting rid of campaign finance caps and things like that. It wouldn't surprise me at all that they would want to do that, that they would want to make it easier for people and companies to donate money. What we need to do when it comes to campaign finance is the exact opposite. Now, one of the things we have to do is get rid of Citizens United. Now, if this Supreme Court uh, surprises me and they overturn Citizens United, I would be floored and flabbergasted. But they're going to take up this case. And Republicans are trying to make it so you can give in whatever kind of money you want, basically. They want to basically allow even more money into politics. And the problem becomes when you have people like uh, Jeff Bezos and you have Elon Musk and other Bill Gates and other people who are true billionaires who have so much more money than the everyday American. And they can, if they're allowed to just dump in whatever amount of money they want into politics, they can buy elections. Now, I know Republicans are going to come back and say, well, what about George Soros? George Soros has been their boogeyman for decades. Decades. And they need to go ahead and they need to figure out somebody else to be their boogeyman. But that's all they've got. They've got one major billionaire that they point to at almost every turn. But you can point to multiple billionaires on the Republican side. The Koch brothers, well, the one surviving Koch brother now, they are big Republican donors. They donate tons of money to all kinds of Republican campaigns, trying to get the politicians they want elected all the time. That's how they operate, right? What this Supreme Court should do is say, no, we are not going to overturn campaign finance guidelines. We are going to limit um, how much money can be donated. We are going to limit the fact that corporations should not be viewed as people. Because that's how a lot of these uh, corporations get around the campaign finance laws. These rich people, they don't personally give the money, they have their company do it. And because it's on behalf of a company, their company just dumps in tons and tons of money and then writes it off, right? We need to do something about this and make it so it's not continuing to happen at all. We need to fix campaign finances so that um, there's a limit to how much money, period. I don't know what that number needs to be. I think right now for individuals, I think it's either 1,000 or 2,000 bucks. Um, and I think that's yearly across, I believe it's all campaigns. Now, I could be slightly wrong about what the limits are, but there's limits for personal contributions, not so much for um, companies. And the other thing we need to do is we need to eliminate these PACs and super PACs because political action committees, they're not connected to the campaign. They don't have the same finance laws, right? And you'll see an ad for a campaign for somebody. I don't know. We'll say Donald Trump. You'll see a supporting Trump ad or whatever put out, and it'll have the name of like uh oh god, Turning Point USA put out the message. Now, I know they're not really that's not really the political action committee, but something like that, right? It'll say something pack paid for by whatever on their ad, maybe on the mailer or what have you. Well, you can dump as much money as you want into these packs, and they are treated differently than straight political contributions. I didn't think they need to go away. These packs and these super PACs, where they have billions and billions of dollars being dumped into them. And the fact that, you know, they buy up all the ad space. Back when I had cable, and I haven't had cable for a while, and when we're getting into, since it seems to be a nonstop political season anymore, um, I see ads on other content, right? So you're watching whatever, and an ad pops up, and suddenly it's political ad paid for by a PAC. The majority of the ads are put out by PACs. And unfortunately, there is a large group of people in this country that believe the misconstrued information put out by these PACs, this propaganda, and it works both ways. It goes in favor of Republicans, in favor of Democrats. These PACs put out uh, stuff trying to make the other look bad. Sometimes it's stuff out of context. Sometimes it's stuff just in general. And sometimes you don't need any context. Again, tying it back to how I started talking about the president and Rob Rainier saying that, well, you know, they deserved it because of Trump derangement syndrome and that they hadn't, that they weren't very well liked. I mean, you could play that clip and you wouldn't entirely need context. Now, I don't think he actually said that, at least the part about Trump derangement syndrome, that was a True Social post. But still, you can put the message up there and it not be edited. There are so many times this happens. And these PACs, we need to limit their money. We need to pull it back and make these elections a lot more fair. Now, I don't know how you do that, whether it is you give them a federal budget and they're only allowed so much money, or, and that's it, that's all they get to spend nationwide. I don't know what the answer is, but PACs and super PACs really aren't the answer because not counting PAC and super PAC money, look at what happened with Kamala Harris in the election in 2024. In 104 days, she raised like $1 billion and spent $1 billion. Think about that amount of money. Okay. Most people in this country are making between 30 and 60, maybe $70,000 a year. That's like the average, I think, is 60 to $70,000 income. That means half of this country is making that much or below, at least. Now, in order to get to $1 billion making, we'll do simple math. Let's say $50,000 a year. Well, you're talking, what would it be? 20 years to get to 1 million. So you're talking 2,000 years to get to $1 billion. 2,000 years of working to raise $1 billion from your job. That's before you pay any taxes, pay any bills, or anything like that. And she spent $1 billion, just herself, just her campaign through donations and things like that. That's not counting PAC money, right? That's the problem. These PACs are causing way too many problems in this country. They have, um, they're able to put out ads all the time. They're constantly running political ads. I mean, they're the group. Some of these PACs are the ones that you would see political ads running day after the election, going against the candidate that just got elected, hadn't even had a chance to do anything yet in some cases. We have to do something to fix that. Now, one of the things Donald Trump wants us to move on from is affordability. He doesn't want to talk about affordability at all. He doesn't want to talk about how things are more expensive under his watch. He's wrecking the economy as we speak. Now, of course, MAGA and Republicans are going to be pointing at certain key things. Well, this is down and that's down. Like, for example, they're going to point out the price of gas. Okay. And I'm thinking about this because I filled up earlier today. And yeah, it was down to 235 here. Okay. 235, pretty good for gas anymore. Uh, well, back when the election happened in 2024, a little over a year ago, 13 months ago, I remember doing TikToks going into it, talking about how I was paying, it was either 265 or 285. Okay. Still not high, not nearly as high as it was. Now, when you hear Republicans and MAGAs talking about gas prices, for example, they still comment on how high it was under Joe Biden because they look at how bad it was during his first year to 2 years when it got up to like over $5 a gallon. I remember paying that and going, Jesus Christ, how bad is this? I mean, I had also just switched vehicles at that point. I went from a little 11-gallon tank car to like a 17-gallon SUV. Still not a big upgrade, but enough that when you're starting to talk about filling up half a tank, it's a significant. When you add in the additional cost and the difference in the size of the tank, it was significant. I noticed it. And of course, MAGA wants to blame Joe Biden for that, but it wasn't Biden's fault. He got the blame because he was the sitting president. But Donald Trump should have the blame because of the deal he cut with OPEC to reduce production for 2 years during COVID. 2 years. Because he didn't know how long COVID was going to last, and he was trying to save the economy. If they wouldn't have cut their production, we could have been dealing with buck 49 gas. I don't know. I'm not the oil and gas expert, but it would have been dirt cheap because it was going way down because no one was going anywhere. People forget that the reason gas prices were so cheap during the end of COVID was because nobody was traveling. Everybody was, well, not everybody. The majority of us who listened to doctors and who listened to experts and who knew what the fuck was going on were staying home. We weren't traveling. We weren't going on vacations. We weren't even going to the office if we could help it. If you had a job that allowed you to do that. Now, I've never been lucky enough to have a work from home job. The few things I've ever done that have been considered work from home would be doing this now, and this really isn't, um, work from home in my book. But I've never had a work from home job. But those that could did, and we found that they were more productive. But see, it ruined the economy by not having people like the economy was in shambles, inflation was up, all of those kind of things, and everybody wants to give Joe Biden the credit for things being horrible. But if it all flows back to Donald Trump, if he hadn't wrecked the economy with COVID, none of that would have happened. So Donald Trump has now he's back in power and he's putting his tariffs on, tariffs off. The economy's not doing very well. But again, Republicans are going to look to certain points. Gas is cheap. Maybe eggs are back to roughly normal. Those kind of things. But other things, you go to the grocery store and they're more expensive. I keep bringing it up. But soda. You constantly see me in these videos having a soda. I like my soda. Um, it is now almost $10 a 12 pack, depending on where you go, not counting sales. Just a few years ago, you could still get them about 3 for 10, not on sale, roughly. They might have been up to $5 each before sales, but still not horrible. And if you really watched your sales, there were times I still remember buying, uh, 6 to 12 at a time because the local grocery store would sometimes be able to get them in at a price and run a 6 for 10 event. Now, the girlfriend I had at the time, of course, didn't like that idea. She's like, "Why are you buying so many?" I'm like, "Because they're cheap." Well, we don't need, we could buy something else with that, and it was a whole thing, but doesn't matter. Um, just my point is, it was still cheap then, even during Trump's first term. But now Donald Trump's fucking everything up with the economy. Tariffs on, tariffs off. His immigration's fucking with the economy. Produce is up. There's so many things that are going on that are directly related to Donald Trump. And no, he doesn't get the same leniency that Joe Biden got by trying to blame the previous guy. Why? Well, in Joe Biden's term, in the first years of his term, he was fixing the problems left by Donald Trump's handling of COVID. Okay, he was changing things and things were getting better. Maybe not quick enough for some people to like because they expected it to be, well, Joe Biden's in, switch gets flipped, everything's better. And that's not what happened. Those things take time to fix. But Donald Trump gets in, and the economy was going pretty good. Inflation was down. Now it's up a little bit. Um, and all of that was going on. Okay. Inflation was going down. We had record job growth, all of this stuff. Everything was looking good. Donald Trump gets in office and he immediately starts changing stuff, tweaking it because only he can fix it. He knows better. He knows how tariffs work. He knows this. He knows that. He's doing this, that, and everything. And the economy goes to shambles. But what does Donald Trump come out at a press conference and say? Priority number one is going to be for his administration next year. Why? It's going to be building an Arc de Triomphe, an Arc de Trump, basically. And if you know what the Arc de Triomphe is, it is a big stone arc in Paris. I believe it was celebrating World War One, their victory in World War One. He wants something like that across from the Lincoln Memorial to honor himself. As people are suffering, as the economy is in the shitter, he wants to build big, elaborate monument to himself. This goes along with the other monument to himself he wants to build, which is his ballroom that he destroyed the East Wing of the White House for, which he is being sued over. And there's going to be a court case about that. And a judge could rule that it wasn't done properly and that they would have to restore the East Wing. Don't know how any of that is going to play out yet. That is still in its beginning stages, in part because the groups responsible for maintaining and preserving historical buildings like the White House were not consulted before Donald Trump had come in with a backhoe and just tore out the East Wing. Why? Because he got his feelings hurt. 10 million people showed up in October to the No Kings rally and marched all across this country in a very peaceful protest with no arrests, no casualties, and nothing he can use to fuel his agenda. And told the president to go fuck himself. That we don't fucking like you. That you're not who should be president right now. And he got his feelings hurt. So he tears out the East Wing. Now, I saw a creator on TikTok, and I think they were uh, reposting from, like, reusing the audio from somebody else. So I don't know who was the original creator behind this idea, but said, they should leave the East Wing as it is, rubble and all. It's the perfect monument to Donald Trump because he destroys everything he touches. Now, I don't want to see that happen. I want to see him restore the East Wing back to how it looked. But if they want to build a monument to Donald Trump somewhere, maybe when he is gone and if they have to tear down the ballroom, if it ever gets built, maybe they need to take that rubble from the ballroom and put it in a monument somewhere and call it a monument to Trump. Be about as fitting, about what he deserves. And he's talking about how that's priority number one as Congress is working on passing something on the ACA subsidies. Now, maybe I'm hopeful, maybe I'm delusional. Both are entirely possible. I think ultimately they're trying to push some of these other ideas that people like Mike Johnson and Donald Trump have of making like a Trump savings account, kind of like a health savings account, taking something that's already existing, renaming it and changing how it works slightly, and giving people, I've heard amounts anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500 directly, and that money can be spent any way you want on healthcare, and that's going to be the way they fix it. I think I said 1,000 to 2,500 monthly. I meant a year. Um, but that's what you're going to be getting from them, and you could spend it on anything healthcare related. And Donald Trump says, "Well, just use it to go buy your own healthcare. What do you need to give the money to the insurance companies for?" Well, who do you think you're going to get the healthcare from? Who are you going to go get insurance from? Nobody else but the insurance companies. Now, that's just how that works. And 1,000 to 2,500 isn't enough to go out and say, I want to get better health coverage. So I need it. I'm going to pay cash. I need to go get this treated. I'm paying cash, right? It's not going to work. Not going to work. Donald Trump has never had to have health insurance. Now he is covered under the government plan, and he'll be covered for the rest of his natural life. And some are arguing that he's maybe already into his unnatural life at this point because of the health care he can receive, that he has only been extended this courtesy of living as long as he has because he has access to that. But before he had the government health care, being a billionaire, being a billionaire like he is, claims to be, um, I don't know which is true anymore because he's gained a lot of money since being president from all of the shady stuff he's been doing. Um, that he can just go pay cash. He can just go pay cash if he needs something done. But that's what he would do before he needed uh, insurance, or before he had the government insurance. He never needed health insurance, right? Oh, I want to go to the doctor's office. He just shows up. They send him a bill. Now maybe he pays it, maybe he doesn't, because we know Donald Trump doesn't pay his bills. But for somebody with millions and millions of dollars in the bank, and you get $100 bill from going to see a doctor, what are you going to do? You pay it. Again, Donald Trump doesn't always pay his bills, but knowing how he feels about his health and looking good and doing all these things, maybe that's one he actually does pay. Because we've never actually heard about doctors saying he owes them money. Um, but for the regular folks, almost all Americans, like I think it's like 65% of Americans, I could be wrong on that stat, are one major medical disaster away from bankruptcy. One. Because you go to the hospital and you get your treatment. If you don't have insurance, you're getting handed $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 worth of bills. My dad had a very serious issue a while back. Now he's on Medicare, and before they ran his Medicare, he had gotten a bill from the insurance, or from the hospital, I mean, before they ran it, and before all of the deductions and everything, and before everything was covered. And if he would have had to pay that amount cash, he goes, he was stressing until he got the adjusted bill. And I told him, I said, just wait, they haven't ran it through insurance yet. They haven't ran it through Medicare. It's going to be much lower. Just give it time. And he was kind of pissed that he had just gotten out of the hospital and he gets this bill in the mail. It almost beat him home, which was ridiculous too. But that's another story. Um, but he gets this bill, and it's for, if I remember right, it was like $60,000, something like that. Now, once they negotiated it down, it was, and once Medicare kicked in and paid as much as they were supposed to pay, it was a couple of $100 or something like that, which was affordable. He could deal with it, no big deal. But he was stressing about it, and he goes, "Well, if Medicare doesn't cover any of this, and if I have got to pay that out of pocket," he was worried about having to sell their home, my parents' home, in order just to pay this bill, because he was worried about making sure it got paid. Now, I know he's probably also in the minority of people who worry about paying their bills on time every time. My folks have never had a late payment. Um, they pay everything as it comes in. And the idea of waiting for getting a bill and then waiting to see what happens is foreign to them. And I had to convince them to calm down and see if you get a corrected bill. Give it a week or two. And that was hard. That was very hard. Everybody in this country, there is far too many people that are one major medical bill away from losing their house, going bankrupt, sticking their kids potentially with generational debt instead of generational wealth, all kinds of things. We need to do something to fix it. But Donald Trump's not worried about doing any of that. He wants to build monuments and things like that. Now, as they're trying to push out this savings plan, what is 1,000 to 2,500 going to do in the face of a $60,000 bill? Using that example I just gave, it's not going to do a damn thing. It's a drop in the bucket. But covering and lowering the premiums for people whose premiums are going to go up by 400% would help people be able to afford health care. And then all they have to do is go to the doctor, and maybe their copays are less. Better yet, why not do both? Why not cover the copays and give them a little bit to help cover the costs associated with it that they could do? Why not do both? Donald Trump would look like a hero. But see, they don't think about that. He just wants the Affordable Care Act to go away. He wants Obamacare to go away because it was passed under Obama. And he doesn't like Obama. Republicans don't like Obama. So they don't want to give him any credit, any wins, nothing like that. They want to make it as bad for Obama as they possibly can. And that's a problem. Now, ultimately, as Congress is working on what to do with the expiring ACA subsidies that expire at the end of the year, and we are 16 days away? I think ultimately they are going to probably land on a 2-year extension. I think they still pass it. And I think they convinced Donald Trump to sign it because they can say, hey, you sign this extension, you'll be the hero for saving the ACA subsidies. And it gives us more time to get something together that is better, that we can A, pass through Congress, and B, that's going to work as intended. So you don't get credit for something that fails almost immediately because we rushed it. And I think you could convince Donald Trump of that would be enough. And I say 2 years because next year's the midterm elections. They're not going to want to have expiring ACA subsidies hanging over their head going into November. They're not. And Republicans would have no desire, if they lose control of the House and the Senate, like I think they will, they'd have no desire to work with Democrats to extend them next year if they lose control of the House and the Senate. They'd say, fuck it, let it expire. You guys are going to get the blame next year when they're not there. They don't want to have to answer questions about it in the midterms. So I think 2 years is what's going to happen, or it's going to be 4, and that they'll expire in 2028. But I don't think they'll go that far. I think it's going to be 2. Um, that's just where I stand on that. Now, I said something way back at the beginning of this about when are Republicans going to find it's time to move on from Donald Trump. Well, today's the 15th. They have 4 days to finish releasing all of the Epstein files. And they're trying to drag their feet on this. They're going to take every last minute that they possibly can. But the Epstein files are set to be released on the 19th in a searchable, downloadable format. And of course, if they do get released, it's going to take a long time to search through it all. But I think if anything comes out connecting Donald Trump to Epstein in a way that confirms he did anything to underage girls, I think that is where Republicans draw the line. And I think they use that as their vehicle to impeach and remove Donald Trump. That is where they decided it's a bridge too far and time to walk away. Now, this is probably going to be too little too late when it comes to the midterms. But their hope isn't necessarily for the midterms. They are hoping to set up a future for 2028. that they can get rid of Donald Trump, put in JD Vance. And then when they have Vance in there, they can say, well, see, Vance was only in there for a short period of time. We need more time with JD to do this and to do that. And we need to be able to work with it, right? That's the problem. That's what they're going for. So I think that's why they move on Donald Trump when it comes to Epstein. I think that is what they can sell their base on. Is we got rid of him because of Epstein. Donald Trump won't see it coming. He's not he I guarantee you nobody around him is telling him that Congress is considering getting rid of him. Because either they don't see it or because you just don't tell him those kind of things. He'd toss you out of the White House if you told them that to his face. He doesn't want to hear it. But right now, with Republicans having control of both chambers of Congress, I think if you see impeachment proceedings pass the House, if they if there are the votes to remove Donald Trump or any of his cabinet, that I think you should accept that it's going to be a foregone conclusion in the Senate that they go away. Not that the charges go away, that Donald Trump goes away, that he gets removed, right? I think Republicans are going to use the Epstein files as their reason. Him fucking around with releasing them potentially. Um, I doubt that they use his mental capacity and the 25th Amendment unless it gets bad enough that they have no choice. But ultimately, Republicans are going to be having to make decisions here. They're going to have to look at everything going on. They're going to have to go ahead and break ties with Donald Trump. And when they do, expect him to try to burn the Republican Party down. And they may have to suffer. Now, somebody pointed out that the last time there was a Republican or a democratically controlled presidency, both chambers of Congress, and a Supreme Court that was appointed by liberals was in the 60s. Before that, it was FDR. And when we had FDR and we had a supermajority in both chambers for an extended period, look at how much FDR was able to get done. That is why I have been saying Democrats need to run in 2028 on an FDR New Deal style message. They need to push that message starting now to get their people in the door, gain as many seats, and I think they could pick up 4 to 6 in the Senate. And then I don't know what the 2028 map looks like, but they need to push to get as many seats in 28 as they can in the Senate. Get as close to that supermajority as they can. And when they do, they need to get to work and actually do things to start helping Americans. 3 years is a long ways away. But there is a chance if Donald Trump goes away between here and there, they would be dealing with President J.D. Vance, who's going to be a weak motherfucker. He's going to be weak as shit, especially if Congress impeaches and removes Trump. J.D. Vance is going to be looking over his shoulder going, don't get rid of me. Don't do anything. You know, and the Democrats would probably going to be able to convince him to go along with some of their priorities and ways of helping because he listened to reason. And maybe we get something accomplished. Probably not. But just because you can talk to him and have a reasonable conversation with JD Vance, who doesn't automatically think he's the smartest person in the room, who doesn't automatically believe he knows more than everybody else, and doesn't automatically believe he needs to get his way at every turn. That's what JD Vance is. That's who JD Vance is. He always wants his way or not JD Vance, Donald Trump. Donald Trump always wants his way, thinks he's the smartest person in the room. The only way you get it anywhere with Donald Trump is by patting him on the back, telling him he's a genius, and telling him how going along with you will make him look good. You won't have that problem with JD Vance. You also won't have JD Vance coming out and saying horrible things about somebody like Rob Rainier, who was I think stabbed but killed apparently by his own son in their home. Donald Trump comes out with not an ounce of sympathy. I believe J.D. Vance at least would have some sympathy in that office. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think J.D. Vance overall gives the Republicans the best chance going forward and their best chance in 28. And it's not a good chance, but their best chance to maintain power in 28, I believe, is having uh, JD Vance in power for as long as possible, which means they need to get the move on and they need to move away from Donald Trump. Now, they should have been doing it a long time ago. And I think that's part of why you're going to see, as long as Democrats get to work and work for the American people and fix as many of the problems as they can once they're back in power, that you are going to see Democrats in power for a while. And Republicans are going to have to fight to end up rebuilding and reimagining their uh, party and their platform. It could, if the Democrats do things the right way and go on a a FDR style message that they need, that they could have power for 20 years. They could. It's possible because they've done it before. The people have shown repeatedly that when you do things that benefits them, they reward you by electing you again. And that's what the Democrats need to do. All right, so that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for joining me on this later episode. I'm going to get to work getting this posted, and I'm going to go ahead and get some TikToks done for today, and hopefully some done for tomorrow. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I hope you have a great day, and we will be back tomorrow.